Chapters 4 to 15, pages 29 to 148. You're going to be staring at my ceiling, because I don't want to put my face in the video. And my voice is on its own, it's just fine. Let's get started. Chapter 4. Mr. Langley, a friend of my father's, has a son who's agreed to drive our carriage for us while my father is working. He meets us at the road and helps us load up the dress. He locks eyes with me and smiles as I climb into the carriage. I look away from him. I'm not in the mood to pretend to be flattered. My mother climbs in behind me, and the carriage moves jerkily down the road. Heavy curtains cover the windows, but the chilly night air still makes its way inside. I tighten my cloak around my shoulders and pull the hood down, covering most of my face. But this isn't a clear enough signal to my mother that I don't want to talk. "He's quite a handsome young man, isn't he?" she asked. I watch my mother as she eyes me carefully. "Who?" "Mr. Langley's son, of course. If he were to find you agreeable, he would have to make an official petition for you at the ball. I'm sure he won't be the only one interested." I shake my head. "Is there ever a time when you're not thinking up ways to marry me off to the first half-decent man you can find?" "Half-decent might be the best we can hope for." She looks down into her lap, pressing her lips together. I pull open the curtain and look outside the window, more to keep my eyes from rolling back into my skull than to take in the view. I'm not angry at her specifically. Her way is the way of most people in Lily. After looking for an opportunity to make the dark seem brighter, she's always... Let me start that over. Always looking for an opportunity to make the dark seem brighter. She's good at it, but I'm not. I can't help but see the ball for what it really is. A trap. We ride through Lily's twisting streets. In the distance, the palace's massive turrets stick up over the sloping landscape. It is extravagant, gaudy, a reminder to the rest of us that no matter how hard we try, we will never be completely worthy of that kind of wealth and that privilege. Just outside the palace grounds is the gated section of Eastern Lily, where the highest-ranking members of the aristocracy live, close enough to the king to make themselves feel special, but not far enough away so they didn't get the impression they were equal to him. The people there hoarded their wealth, improving their own lives while the rest of the city fell into decay. As our carriage pulls into the western part of the city, the identical houses along the cobbled alleys lean on one another, as if they might collapse in on themselves without the added support. The evening hours bring with them a particularly confusing mixture of scents. Scents of freshly baked bread and boiled meats waft through, but they are tinged with the distinct smell of excrement, human and animal alike. No lamps light my street other than the ones people keep in their windows. We roll to a stop, and my mother climbs out. I stand on the carriage step for a moment, hoping to put some distance between us. She isn't going to let me go to bed without having a talk. She reaches the front step and looks back at me, a expression drawn across her face. Mr. Langley's son places the dress box on the doorstep, then clears his throat. I glance over at him, and he flashes another wide smile. I'm about to tell him that he looks ridiculous and is clearly making a fool of himself when my mother calls to me. "Sophia, come inside." She knows me too well. She pushes the door open as the bell tolls, signaling curfew for Lily's women and children. Her foot keeps time with the thunderous gongs. At the final stroke of 8, we are meant to be inside, behind our locked doors. Sometimes I stand on the front stoop as the last bell tolls, just to see what might happen. On those occasions, my mother darts around the house in a fit, wishing I would sit down and stop trying to get myself arrested like some damned fool. When I was little, my mother told me that if I wasn't inside at the toll of the final bell, that the ghosts of Cinderella's evil stepsisters would swoop in and take me away. Now that I'm older, I understand that it's not vengeful spirits that I need to be afraid of. The king and his men pose the biggest threat. I step out and make my way to the door, avoiding my mother's stare and squeezing past her as she closes it and locks it behind me. I head for the stairs. "Sit," she says, as she pulls a chair from our dining room table. She walks to the other side and sits down. I want to go upstairs and fall into bed, but we'll have to have this little talk first. I join her at the table and stare across at her. Most people think my mother and I are sisters, so alike are our features. Our dark, curly hair is identical except that her strands are lightly flecked with gray. We share the same deep brown complexion, but she has lines set in the corner of her mouth. People call them laugh lines, but I'm certain hers are from frowning. I was chosen by your father my first year at the ball, and it was a good match, she begins. He was the son of a land baron, and he is a decent man, a good man. I know. She's told me this before, but an urgency tints her voice now, like she's trying to convince me that there's some glimmer of hope. But some are not so lucky, she says, her tone deadly serious. Do you understand what that must be like, to not be chosen? What the repercussions of that would be? Of course I understand. That possibility scares her almost more than anything else. Girls who aren't chosen by their third ball are considered forfeit, ending up in working houses or in servitude. But in recent years, several girls have disappeared into the castle and were never heard from again. My mother runs her hands over the pleats in her dress and sighs. Tell me something, Sophia. Do Aaron and Liv know how difficult you can be? How stubborn? Yes, I say. It's a half-truth. Aaron and Liv are my closest friends, and I can be myself around them for the most part, but even in their presence, I feel like I have to hold back because Lily has left its mark on them too. They hear me speaking of leaving, of resisting what is expected of us, and they tell me to lower my voice. Those things are simply not done. No one leaves. No one resists who isn't courting death. I do hope Liv finds a match this year, my mother says, staring off. Her parents are very worried, and if she's not chosen this time, she'll only get one more chance. That a girl is considered a spinster if not married by 18 is wrong, and that the boys don't even have to attend the ball until they want to is a sickening double standard. It's not her fault she wasn't chosen. Liv hadn't been selected at last year's ball. Aaron and I had discussed it, and neither of us could understand why. Liv almost never brought it up, but I gleaned that someone had made a claim on her, and at the very last minute had chosen another girl. Now Liv was brandishing a replica wand, hoping to conjure some magical assistance. After everything they'd seen and gone through the previous year, Liv and her parents still hoped she would receive a visit from the fairy godmother. They had convinced themselves that one didn't show up the year before because they hadn't been pious enough in following Cinderella's example. I am not going to be visited by some magical old crone, I say, frustration bubbling up inside me. Maybe not, my mother says in a whisper, but you'll look like you were, and that is what the suitors and the king care about most. You think they would care about me, about what I feel? Even as I say the words, I know they fly in the face of everything I know to be true, and my mother agrees. Why in the name of King Manford would they ever think that? She asks. She squeezes her hands together like she's praying, but the skin over her knuckles is stretched tight. We've got one chance at this. You must find a match. Going back to a ball the second time is an embarrassment. Her words cut through me like a knife. Is Liv an embarrassment? How could you say that about her? It's not her fault some disgusting old man changed his mind. She looks away. She knows what's at stake. Foolish wishes and magic aren't going to save her. She must conform, know her place, and do whatever must be done to find a match. And so do you. She leans towards me. I know you're different, and that this will be hard for you, but you have no choice. Different. That's how she sees me, and every time she uses that word, a distinct air of disapproval accompanies it. Lily has left its stain on her, too. I want to be with Aaron. I know, she says, glancing around as if someone might hear. But you will keep that to yourself. Her tone is flat, emotionless. It's how she protects herself from the reality of what I'm facing. I was 12 when I told my parents I would much rather find a princess than the prince. They had gone into a state of panic, from which they emerged with a renewed sense of determination. They told me that in order to survive, I would have to hide how I felt. I was never very good at it, and the weight of the mask was growing heavier with each passing year. I want nothing more than to cast it aside. You don't have to resist every little thing. It will do you no good, and I will not lose you, says my mother as she grips the edge of the table. I can't. You must attend. You must play the part. She sits back as if she is exhausted, letting her shoulders roll forward and exhaling softly. Your father is working on brokering another sale as we speak to bring in extra money we need for... She stops. Her voice catches in her throat. Her eyes become glassy as she puts her hand on top of mine. I love you very much. I would do anything to ensure you are the most beautiful girl in the room when you make your entrance. My whole life has been a build-up to this. This isn't some little thing. Everything I do, everything I say, it's all about the ball. My path has been chosen for me since birth. My future is already written, and I don't have a say in any of it. Yes, and... She stares at me blankly, as if she can't understand. Don't you want me to be happy? Isn't that what matters most? In the brief moment before her answer, I imagine she'll say yes and tell me I don't have to go. I think of what it would feel like to have her on my side. No, my mother lets go of my hand. Bitter disappointment envelops me. What matters is that you are safe, that we follow the laws. They are clear as day, right there. She motions to the front door. Happiness is a bonus, Sophia. You're not entitled to it, and the sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. And if I don't want an easy life? My mother stares at me. She parts her lips to speak and then presses them together, dropping her gaze to the tabletop. Be very careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. May I be excused? I ask. She nods, and I push my chair back from the table and go upstairs. As I reach the top step, I hear my mother crying. A part of me wants to go to her, but a part of me doesn't. I love her, and I know she loves me, but that's not enough. She will not break the rules, even if they require me to deny everything about myself. I go into my room and close the door. Chapter 5. The next morning, I awake just before sunrise. My father is already gone for the day, and my mother has begun her work preparing for breakfast. Doe sits rising under a cloth just by the wood stove, which she takes and sets a kettle on. I join her in the kitchen and tie an apron around my waist. My mother places a small plate with 2 biscuits and a sliced apple on the table. She speaks to me over her shoulder as she turns out a ball of dough onto the floured surface of the countertop. The floors will need to be swept and scrubbed, like always, and it's wash day for the linens upstairs. Take the rugs out and give them a good beating. Your father said he might come home early, so we must get to it. When he arrives, be sure to recite the story as soon as you can, because I know he'll be tired and will want to rest. You want me to recite it out loud? I ask. I know that's what we're supposed to do. It's more of a tradition than a rule, but I hadn't done it in a long time. Yes, my mother says curtly. Maybe you're a little rusty, and with the ball coming up, you'll want to know it backwards and forwards in case a suitor wants to test your knowledge. I don't even respond. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The suitors will test me? I have a strong urge to tell my mother that I'm pretty sure the men gathering at the castle haven't even read the story all the way through, because none of it is actually meant for them. It's meant for the rest of us. I just nod. I put on a cloak and start lugging the rugs outside. Would there really be suitors wanting to test me? And does my father really want to hear it? Or is my mother just thinking of every single way someone might try to trip me up once I'm at the ball? The wife of a wealthy man grew ill and knew that her end was near, I say aloud. It's still there in my head, every word. I'm beating the rugs out when my mother opens the front door and a concerned look on her face. Sophia, I need you to go see Mrs. Bassett. I'm afraid I forgot the ribbons that match your dress at her shop. The ones for your hair. You don't want to go? I ask. I get a clear look at her for the first time that morning. She has dark circles under her eyes like she hasn't slept. No, I'm not feeling well. I've sent Henry to tell Mr. Langley's son to be here within the hour to take you. I glance around to see if Henry, our neighbor's young son, has already left. I can walk, I say, or I can take the carriage myself. She shakes her head. Alone? Sophia, please, my nerves are already shattered. Don't add to it with your penchant for trying to break the law. It's not a law. She plants her foot on the stoop with a loud thud. You'll be taken up to the palace in chains if you're caught driving the carriage, and if you go walking alone, you might end up in a far worse situation. Something in her tone strikes me. Her emotions, usually tightly coiled, seem to be fraying more and more with each passing day. I won't tell her I walked through the woods and into the city on my own yesterday. She might not survive the shock. Mr. Langley's son will be here soon, she says. He'll take you. She goes inside and I wait in the yard. As scheduled, he comes strolling up through the dissipating mist. He leans over the gate and gives me a little nod. Morning, he says. He shows me that mischievous smile again. I'm fairly good at reading people, but this boy is a puzzle. The curl of his lip and his smug smile make me think I'm missing something. Ready? He asks. I nod, and he pulls up the wooden cart that we take to the market instead of the covered carriage we used to travel. It's made to haul sacks of grains and only has one wide seat in the front. He hitches it to our horse and climbs up. It's cold, I say. We should take the carriage. But I've already got this one ready to go. Don't you want to sit next to me? Absolutely not, and if you asked me beforehand, I would have told you to hook up the carriage, but you didn't, so here we are. He raises an eyebrow. So you run the show around here. That's different. Different, I say quietly. Different never means anything good. The front door creaks open behind me. Is she giving you any trouble? My mother calls from the doorway. I don't turn around, but I can feel her eyes boring into the back of my head. No problem, Mrs. Grimm's. Mr. Langley's son shoots me a quick wink, as if he expects a thank you for not telling my mother what I said. He's going to be sorely disappointed. I climb up, staying as far away from him as I can on the seat allows. He yanks the reins, and the car lurches forward. The temperature stays cool, even as the sun rises. I pull my cloak in tight around me, but the air still seeps through. Mr. Langley's son sets the reins in his lap and removes his coat. Here, it's not much, but it should help. He places the coat over my shoulders, and I lean away from him, watching his hands and his eyes. I don't know him enough to trust him, and most times when a man does a woman a favor, it's because he wants something in return. Am I that off-putting? He raises an arm and gives a whiff. Do I smell? I just bathed last week. He's trying to be funny. I don't respond. My name's Luke, in case you were wondering. I know, I say flatly. We've never been formally introduced, but I've heard my parents speak of him a little too often. You're always with your mother. She doesn't let you get a word in edgewise. I watch him out of the corner of my eye, or maybe I don't have much to say. Okay, he grimaces a little. I was surprised at your outburst back there with the cart. I've never seen a girl refuse a man's request so openly. That's a dangerous thing to do. Are you joking or threatening me? I angled my body so I can raise my leg and kick him over the side of the cart if he gets any ideas. Girls are harassed and manhandled on a regular basis in Lily, and because of that I actually have a plan for what to do if someone ever tries to hurt me. If Luke makes one false move, I'll smash his nose back into his skull, maybe kick him where he'd feel it the most, and then run. I can also grab the reins, pull the horse off the road, and flip the cart over. I don't care if I get hurt in the process. I'm not going quietly. I wasn't joking, but I wasn't threatening you either. I'm sorry. He looks at me and smiles again. His demeanor is abrasive, but not malicious. He can't be more than 20, tall and lanky, brown skin, black hair, and with only the slightest air of self-importance. I still have a hard time reading him. I keep my body in a position to upend him, but pose a question as a distraction. Are you preparing for the ball as well? He tosses his head back and laughs. He catches me so off guard that all I can do is stare at him. He composes himself and shakes his head. Not if I can help it. Things are different for me. Why? I ask. He's lost some of that bravado he had when he strode up to my front gate. We stop in front of the seamstress's shop. You're friends with Erin, aren't you? He doesn't meet my eyes. The question seems out of place, and I bristle. Yes, she's one of my best friends. He says, nodding. Then you'll understand what I mean when I say things are different. The knowing look in his eyes terrifies me. I've seen it before. It's the same look my mother gives me every time I speak Erin's name. I immediately hop out of the cart and toss his coat back to him. Just wait here, please. Sure, he says. I worry that his friendly manner is just a way to get me to feel comfortable enough to drop my guard. I hurry to the door of the shop and go in. None of the lamps are lit yet, and the dappled light from the barely risen sun casts shadows through the room, which feels oddly at rest without the seamstress and her bevy of helpers bustling around. A measuring tape hangs over the edge of the table. A dozen of glass beads litter the floor as if they'd been knocked over without anyone bothering to clean them up. I see the ribbons my mother left behind sitting on the table in a canvas bag. I picked them up. Just then, a whimper comes from under the table. I step back and look down to see if someone's sitting there. A young boy, his knees pulled into his chest as he rocks back and forth. Hello, I say gently. The boy's head pokes up from behind his knees, his eyes rimmed with tears. He sucks in a gulp of air and wipes his nose with the back of his hand. He's dressed in a tattered pair of slacks and a faded shirt, a size too small. The sleeves expose his delicate, thin wrist. He seems so fragile. I want to put my arms around him and tell him everything is going to be okay, even though I have no idea what's going on. He sobs again. Oh no, please don't cry. Are you all right? I put my hand out, but he scurries back, knocking into the leg of the table and sending more beads scattering to the floor. I won't hurt you, I swear. The eerie silence of the shop sets me on edge. I don't know you, he says. No, I don't think we've met. My name is Sophia. The seamstress is helping me with my dress, and I just came to pick these up. I crouch down and hold out the bag of ribbons. See? His expression softens. Why are you crying? He opens his mouth to speak but hesitates. Then he scoots closer, so he is almost out from under the table. He's too loud, he says, cupping his hands over his ears and shutting his eyes. Who's too loud? I ask, confused. A man's voice, shrill and grating, echoes from somewhere above my head. Heavy footsteps pound across an upstairs room. I look up as the entire structure of the house quakes. Dust shaken free from the wood beams, crisscrossing the ceilings, falls down through the shadowy confines of the shop and settles like a fine powder on the tables and chairs. I fight the urge to pick up the boy and bolt out the door. The boy lowers his hands, his eyes wide. My father, he's yelling at my mother. He's always yelling at her. The light streaming through the shop windows illuminates the boy's face. He is nearly identical to the seamstress. They share the same brown skin, dark eyes, and dimples at the outer corner of their mouths. A large crash, followed by a woman's scream, pierces the momentary silence. I stand up, and the boy scurries back. I look to the front window and see Luke still perched on the cart. What a man does in his home is his business. That is the rule. I should leave, but I can't do that. You just stay here, all right? Okay, he answers from under the table. I creep to the rear of the shop, where a staircase leads up to the second floor. I put my hand on the rail and listen. The silence is almost unbearable as the woman screams. At the top of the stairway is a door, and the soft light streams from underneath it. The stairwell is dark and shadowy, with thin shafts of light from under the door illuminating bits of dust floating in the air. I take one step up. I don't know what I will do when I get to the top. Knock? Call out? Can I even stop what is happening? The man's voice sounds again, and this time I hear the words clearly. You've kept money from me, haven't you? He bellows. Then comes a woman's voice. No, I would never. Every cent you make belongs to me. There's a loud thump, like someone ran into the door at the top of the stairs, and the door creaks open a few inches. I step up onto the landing and peek inside. I know that. I swear I work hard. The seamstress cowers against the wall of the small upstairs room. Tears stain her face. Her husband stands over her, his fists clenched. Then what is it? There's so little money in this pouch. I wonder why you even bother. Either you're a terrible seamstress, or you're keeping the money for yourself. He flings the pouch at her, and it breaks open, sending a shower of coins tinkling to the floor. Everyone is having a hard time, the woman says. The king has taxed us so steeply that we can scarcely afford grain. Others are suffering too, but they need to make their girls ready for the ball. I take what they can afford to give. That's every red cent. I swear it. You take what they can... Sorry, I need to get quiet. Pretty intense. You take what they can afford to give? What are we, a charity? He raises his fist, and the woman winces as if he's already struck her. I put my hand on the door, and the floorboard groans under my weight. I cringe as the man's head whips around. He is short and stocky, but his hands are massive. I'm looking for the seamstress, I say, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Who the hell are you? He sticks out his neck and glares at me. My mother purchased some ribbons, but she left them here. Can you help me find him? I look directly at the seamstress as I tuck the ribbons out of sight. If you could, I would appreciate it. The man steps in front of the woman, blocking my view. I scowl at him. Watch yourself before I send you up to the palace to be forfeited. The man snaps. He can do that. Any head of household could. The only person who can disagree is another head of household. Money, power, class, all those things come into play, but the founding tenet of our laws is that women, no matter their standing, are at the mercy of the fickle whims of men. That's how little control I have over my own life. I continue to glare at him as he shuffles off to an adjoining room. The seamstress scrambles to her feet and comes rushing out the door, swiping at her eyes. Your son... She grabs me by the elbow and leads me to the main room of the workshop before I have a chance to finish my sentence. She bends down, pulls the boy out from under the table, and wraps her arms around him, all the while glancing nervously towards the back staircase. Her son melts into her, grasping her tightly and sobbing. Tears well up in my eyes, and I have a hard time figuring out if it is my anger or my absolute heartbreak for the seamstress and her son that is gaining the better of me. The seamstress gently nuzzles her nose into his hair. She spots the bag of ribbons in my hand. I see you found your missing ribbons. I'm glad you remembered to come pick them up. You'll look lovely. If I hadn't seen what just happened or the welt on her cheek, her tone would have convinced me that nothing was amiss. I didn't mean to intrude, or maybe I did, but I saw your son and heard your husband upstairs. The woman's body tenses as she's bracing for what I might say next. She stands, pulling her son up with her, and straightens out his clothes. He looks to be no more than 7 or 8 years old, but the bags under his eyes are those of a child who's seen too much. She kisses him and points towards the room directly across from the main work area. You, go get something to eat. Breakfast is on the table. She smiles at him, and he looks to the stairs and nods. He embraces her again, and she looks down at the boy. Papa knows best, my love. You will grow up to be a good man, just like him. The boy doesn't smile as he disappears into another room. The seamstress strains out her dress and avoiding my gaze. A sigh escapes me, and the seamstress glances over, her mouth turned down. Don't pity us, please. This isn't what we need. What do you need? I ask. I step towards her. You don't have to. I mean, I could. What could you do? The woman laughs lightly. Oh, you poor thing. You're one of those girls who thinks there's a way out, aren't you? That something will come along and make everything better. She sighs and shakes her head like she's angry. I wish there were. I swear I do. I wish I could tell you to run, to hide, but it would never work. Her voice is so low that I have to lean in close to understand. Nothing can be done. Not a damn thing. I want to believe there might be a way out, but with every passing day that feeling fades. I wonder when this woman gave up hoping. You've got your ribbons, and I've got work to do. You best be off. I hesitate. You deserve more than this. We all do. The woman pauses. I can see a small cut over her eye. Her lips part, on the verge of saying something, but she holds back. Please go. I slowly walk out of the shop to find Luke standing next to the cart. Everything all right? No, I say, climbing up and taking a seat. Let's go. Luke glances back at the shop and joins me in the cart. I'm sick to my stomach as the cart starts to move. How many people do you think are poorly matched at the choosing ceremony? I ask, numb. I try to wrap my head around what I just witnessed. Like a clash of personalities? Luke asks. No, I mean like a man takes a wife and then mistreats her, hits her. Luke looks at me out of the corner of his eye. You didn't know that sometimes happens? It happens all the time, I say. That's my point. I can't think of how terrible it is to have to deal with the king's rules and then go home to have your husband beat you. I understand, Luke says. How could you? You aren't being beaten in front of your own child. You're not being forced to go to the palace for the ball. You're what, 20, and you say you've never been to a ball? We don't have that luxury. Luke stares at me in silence. He pulls the horse into a slow trot, and we meander in the general direction of my house. Is there a reason you're going so slow? I ask. He smiles warmly. Just hoping to get to know you a little bit more before the ball? Before some man decided I'd make a pretty prize and everything in my life changed forever? Luke looks a little taken back. His big brown eyes dart around as if he's rehearsing what he is about to say. You're a rare person, Sophia. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, I say, still skeptical of his intentions. He continues to guide the cart along the road as others pass us. We come to a rise in the road, and Luke brings the cart to a full stop. My heart rate ticks up. What are you doing? Why are we stopping? Luke looks out over the wide swath of land to the east. The sun is high above the horizon now, casting an orange glow through the wispy clouds and across the apple orchards. The trees there are every shade of russet and gold as the land prepares to sleep for the winter. He glances at me with his brow furrowed, his mouth drawn into a tight line. I wonder if I might share something with you, he said. He is calm, soft-spoken, but it seems very serious, and my curiosity is piqued. But keep my guard up, just in case. All right, what is it? He doesn't speak right away. He gazes off, biting his bottom lip. I've been mentally calculating how I'm going to get away from you if you try anything, I say. I'm pretty sure you're not going to hurt me, so I want to hear what you have to say. Hurt you? He looks puzzled. Why would I want to do that? I give an exaggerated look around. Because this is Lily. That's what happens here. I can't blame you for feeling that way, but not everyone is like that. I pinch the bridge of my nose and shut my eyes for a second. I know that. My father is a good man. Liv's father is a good man. And even Luke's father seems like a good man. But these good men aren't making the rules. These decent men are turning a blind eye to indecent acts. If you're not one of the men who would jump at the first chance to put a woman in her place, then I'm not talking about you. He hesitates for a moment before sighing. That's fair. A high-pitched whistle sounds from behind me, and I see two young men striding up to us, their chests pushed out, smirking. Shit, Luke says under his breath. He moves closer to me. What's wrong? Nothing, just some people from school. Luke, one of the young men shouts. He's smiling wide, but Luke isn't. What are you up to on this beautiful fall morning? Just out for a ride? Luke's tone is biting, angry. Out for a ride? With a girl? The taller man asks. The ring in his voice makes me pause, and he looks me over. His beady brown eyes remind me of the glass marbles the children on my street play with. Do I know you? I ask. The man's head snaps up. Not yet, but maybe we can do something about that. Shut up, Morris, says Luke. Morris? I ask, glancing up at Luke. What a lovely name. Sounds a lot like moron. This time Luke smiles wide. You've got a smart mouth, Morris says, glaring at me. Don't you have somewhere to be? Luke inches closer to me. His body has gone rigid and his fists are clenched. Morris smiles, but it makes me uncomfortable. There's nothing kind about it. Are you claiming this wretch at the ball? Morris asks. Luke bristles. Why does it matter to you? I cross my arms. I hate this kind of talk, especially when I'm sitting right here. She doesn't seem like your type, Morris says, grinning as if he's said something hilarious. I've missed something. Fear clouds Luke's eyes. Morris looks back and forth between us. Oh! He claps his hand on the other man's back, and they laugh. She doesn't know, does she? Luke looks down at the reins, gathered in his lap. Morris steps forward and takes my hand. I try to pull away, but he has me by the wrist and holds it tight. Luke here has all kinds of secrets. You should ask him about them sometimes. He looks at Luke. What's that young fellow's name? Was it Luke? Before he could finish, Luke's fist connects with Morris's right cheek, sending spittle and at least 2 teeth flying from his mouth. He lets go of me and stumbles back, clutching his jaw. The other man stands still, stunned. Luke hops out of the cart as Morris clutches his face. If you ever so much as breathe a syllable of his name in my presence, I will make you regret it, Luke says. Consider this your only warning. Morris's face is ruddy, dripping with sweat, his mouth bloody. He tenses like he's going to attack Luke again, though I can't understand how he thinks that will be a good idea. Don't do it, his friend says to him, reading his expression. Let's get out of here. He takes Morris by the arm and pulls him away until he disappears down the road. Luke hops back into the cart. Morris's broken teeth lie like pearls in the cracks of the cobbled street. Should we pick those up and return them to him? I ask. Maybe put them on a string he can wear around his neck? Luke chuckles, massaging his hand and straightening out his shirt. I'm sorry about that. You don't have to apologize, I say. I would pay money to see despicable men get socked in the jaw. Morris was trying to get under your skin. Why does he dislike you so much? Luke looks at me and then shakes his head. It's complicated. Morris said I'm not your type. It's okay. I'm not offended. You're not my type either. I'm trying to lighten the mood, but Luke frowns. Oh, I know. My skin pricks up. Luke sighs and leans back into his seat. He struggles with something, and with each passing moment I grow more afraid of what it is. Luke looks thoughtful as he stares off. Everything we do is measured against Cinderella's story, but what happens if, well, let's say, he shifts around fumbling with his reins. Why is that story the only way of doing things? I'm not sure what you mean, I say, but we should get going. My mother... Luke glances over at me. When my sister read that story as a child, I remember thinking Prince Charming would make a good husband. For me. What? I'm breathing so fast that little orbs of light dance around in the edge of my vision. Did you want to marry the prince? Or maybe the princess? He asks. Why are you asking me this? My voice is barely above a whisper and my heart pounds. I have to go. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, and I swear I'll never say a word about any of this to anyone. His face is tightly drawn, his eyes downcast. He struggles to find the words to continue. It's just that I know about you and Aaron. A sinking feeling overtakes me. What about me and Aaron? I overheard your mother talking to my mother. He watches me carefully, reading my expression. What did she say? I can't imagine my mother telling anyone about my feelings. She doesn't even want to hear me talk about it. She said she was afraid you couldn't hide your feelings for Aaron, and that sometimes it was like you didn't even want to. The world has suddenly become unnaturally quiet. Carriages pass by us, and I don't hear the wheels on the road. I don't see anything but Luke's face. It never occurred to me that my mother would confide in anyone other than my father. Why would she do that? I ask. Why would she talk to your mother about me? He angles his body towards me. It's true then. An almost hopeful look spreads across his face. I don't say anything, but my silence is a confirmation enough for him. I know what it's like to feel as if everyone wants you to be something you're not. His eyes soften and he sighs. When I was 17, I fell in love with a boy named Lewis. That's who Morris was referring to. He was a light in the world that was so dark. So dark, Sophia. You can't imagine. Yes, I can, I say without thinking. Being face to face with someone who might understand how I feel overwhelms me. I wait for him to continue. He allowed me to envision what life could be like for me. When I was with him, nothing else mattered. We planned to flee, but when Morris and his brother Edward found out about us, they told our classmates, and of course the news reached Lewis's parents. They asked him if it was true, and he would not deny it. They took him to the palace as forfeit. I never saw him again, his eyes filled with tears. They gave him up, just like that? It's horrifyingly simple for people to forfeit their own children. I've seen it happen dozens of times, but it never gets any easier to imagine. I reach out and put my hand over his. I'm so sorry. He blinks back tears. My parents will have done the same to me if my sister hadn't convinced them that our relationship was a phase and that I'd grow out of it. She knew it was a lie, and I think my parents did as well, but they chose to believe it rather than surrender me to the palace. My heart shatters into 1,000 pieces for what he has lost, what we've all lost. People who don't fit nicely into the boxes the kings of Massalis have defined are simply erased, as if our lives don't matter. Luke hangs his head. Have you ever heard of a man marrying another man? A woman being in love with another woman? Of people who find their hearts, or somewhere in the middle, or with neither. It's only as a cautionary tale that ends up with people imprisoned or dead. I slump down against the seat, crushed by the hopeless feelings that always seem to find me. Luke picks up the reins, and we begin to move. I can avoid the ball for as long as I choose, he says, and people wouldn't think twice if I'm old and gray before I go out to the palace. He shifts as if he is uncomfortable with what he said. You don't have that privilege, and my heart breaks for you and Aaron, and for all the rest of us who have to hide. All the rest of us? I ask. Luke nods. The kings that have ruled Mersalis would like you to believe that you're alone, but it's not true. People wear masks so they can fit in and stay safe. Can you blame them? No, I guess not, I say. Isn't that what I'm doing? Hiding, pretending, just trying to stay safe? As we approach my house, the weight of our revelations bear down on us, and the feeling of utter despair is palpable. I climb out, taking the bag of ribbons from the bed of the cart. What will you do? Luke asks. I shrug. I don't feel like I have any choices. We should look for an out, says Luke, and at that first opportunity, we should run as far away as possible. Do you think things are different past the towers? I think of what might lie beyond the capital, beyond the furthest border of Mersalis. Maybe. For now, just try to stay safe. That's all either one of us can do. He reaches out a hand and presses a few silver coins into the palm of my hand. Your mother feels better when she pays me for driving the cart, but I've told her it's not necessary. Maybe you should keep it. Prepare for your great escape. I take the coins, even though I don't think that there will be an escape. Not for Aaron and me, not for Luke or Liv or anyone else. We are all trapped here. Our story is already written. Chapter 7. My mother is standing over me, nudging me out of bed. I've drawn you a bath, she whispers. Her hands are like ice as she pulls the blankets off of me. I blink repeatedly. Get up, Sophia. We have work to do. I look out my bedroom window to see the sun cresting over the horizon. Against my sincerest wishes, the day of the ball arrived, and my mother is already preparing. I slide out of bed and plant my feet on the cold wood floor. My mother shakes her head as she looks at me. What is it? I ask. Nothing. Her voice cracks and she quickly looks away. Into the tub. We don't have much time. It's dawn, I say. The ball doesn't begin for hours. I want to crawl back into bed and pull the covers over my head. She stops in my doorway, her hand resting on the jamb. She doesn't look at me. We'll be at this all day. Best to get started right now. She disappears into the hallway. I trudge into the washroom and bathe, stalling until the water turns cold and my fingertips wrinkle. I slip into a dressing gown my mother has left for me. Uncontrollable hopelessness sweeps over me, the feeling of hurtling off a cliff and not being able to do anything about it. I could be chosen, and my life would be only what my husband said it could be, or I might not be chosen at all. I wonder if my parents could forfeit me so easily, the same way Louis's parents had. A knock at the door startles me out of my thoughts. I open it to find 4 women waiting for me on the other side. I don't recognize any of them. I move closer to the door, and one woman pushes it open again. Now, dearie, she croaks. Don't need to be nervous. They pounce on me instantly, and I push them away as they pull at my dressing gown. Mother, I call out. For goodness sake, Sophia, they are dressers, my mother says as she stands in the hall. Is this really necessary? I've been getting dressed on my own since I was 7. I'm sure I can manage. You hush now and let them do what I'm paying them for. The women begin again. 2 of them help me into a set of undergarments, while the other 2 rub scented oils into my skin. My mother oversees every detail, like the perfectionist she is. Make sure the garters are knotted tightly, she says. We can't have her stockings rolling down. Oh no, we can't have that. What would people say if they knew about my droopy stockings? I exaggerate every word, and one of the dressers cackles. My mother is stone-faced. I know I'm being silly, uncooperative, but I don't see how my stockings make a single bit of difference in all this. They tug at the corset, and I let out a yelp as someone yanks the laces together. Does it have to be this tight? Yes, says my mother. We'll need to move downstairs to fit the farthingale. There's not enough room up here. The women buzz around me as I go downstairs. I'm trying to figure out what a farthingale is, while focusing on not breathing too deeply. The walls and ceiling switch places right before my eyes, and I hear high-pitched ringing in my ears. Someone lightly tugs at my back, and then suddenly I can take a deeper breath. I gulp in air and glance at the woman behind me. She winks. I'm not going to faint, but vomiting isn't completely ruled out. The curtains in our front room are drawn, and a stool sits in the middle of the room. My mother brings in the petticoat and a camisole that I slip on. As soon as I stumble onto the stool, the women tug at my hair. Tears well up in my eyes as I tip my head back to keep them from pouring down my face. "Aw, don't cry," says the woman who had loosened my corset. "You'll catch a husband like a fish on a hook with a face like that." No, it's not that. I try to slow my breathing and concentrate on not running out the front door. My mother watches me with concern in her eyes. "We should straighten her hair with an iron," one of the women said. "It would be prettier that way, and I heard the king himself prefers it." Sorry, I need water. I've been talking for a while. "Or we could leave it the way it is," I say through clenched teeth. They all laugh as if I made a joke. It isn't funny. It feels like another part of me is being changed to fit someone else's vision of what is pretty. I especially don't want to do anything the king prefers. "Pull it straight and pin it up," my mother says, "and use the ribbons. It takes hours for them to finish my hair. When they are done, they set to work on my makeup." "Which one do you like?" asks one of the younger women. She holds up 3 small tins, each with varying shades of pink. It's for the lips. I reach out and touch the least ostentatious of the 3 when my mother steps in and chooses the color most akin to actual blood. After the women finish my makeup, they bring in something that looks like a large hoop made from reeds with bits of fabric connected to the rim and gathered in the middle. They place it on the floor. They motion for me to step into the center. As I stand in the middle, they pull the hoop up, attaching the fabric strips around my waist like a belt. I can just barely touch the edges of the thing as it hangs around me. "It looks wonderful," my mother says. "How am I supposed to sit down?" "You don't need to sit down. You need to mingle, dance if you're asked. The shape of the farthingale is accentuated when you stand." "Please don't say farthingale anymore," I say dryly. It sounds like a torture device, which is accurate. My mother goes into the next room and returns with the main part of the gown. She and one of the other women pull the light blue frock out of its cloth sack. They slip the upper part over my head and adjust it before attaching the skirt to the loop. The weight of it all holds me in place, like an animal in a trap. When my mother brings out my shoes, I almost faint, and not because I can barely breathe. The heels of the glittering monstrosities are nearly 5 inches tall, and the toes are so pointed that a normal human foot can never fill its proportions. "Am I supposed to wear those?" I ask. "Obviously," my mother says. I'm reminded that this isn't about what I want or what I like. It's about what everyone else thinks is best, and I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. My shoulders sit exposed, and the woman beside me dusts my décollage with a fine pearly powder that sparkles in the dancing candlelight. I try to tune out their chatter about the king, the ball, how they all met their husbands at an event just like this one, and how Cinderella herself had once sat by her prince to preside over the gathering. "She was a beauty, to be sure," says one woman, "and not just on the outside. She was a kind person, heart of gold, something about her shined. Everybody was drawn to her." "It's a tragedy that she died so young," says another of the women. "I think she would have loved to see all the young women following in her footsteps." "I picked the blue to honor her," says my mother. I look down at the dress. It's a pale blue color, matches the description of the dress in the story, but I think that is where it's where the similarities end. Would Cinderella really have been this delighted to see so many girls unhappy, dreading this moment? "It's all we can do now, isn't it?" That's one of the helpers. "To honor her, we have to do it in these small, sentimental ways. We used to be able to pay our respects in a more traditional way." My mother's face grows tight, which always means someone is saying something they shouldn't. "What do you mean?" I ask. The woman sighs, and my mother shoots her a pointed glance. She continues anyway. "My great-grandmother told me that her grandmother had actually seen Cinderella's tomb with her own eyes, that people used to leave flowers and trinkets for her." "Why?" I ask. "Why leave anything for her?" The women all stare at me like I have 2 heads, and I stop talking. My mother looks like she might faint. Cinderella's story is the reason I'm being forced to go to the ball, the reason my parents have gone into debt to provide me a dress and shoes and all the pretty things I could ever need. Her story is the reason why none of the things I want for myself mattered. "Are we finished?" my mother asked. "Finished," the woman says. The other women step back, admiring their handiwork. They drag a full-length mirror into the room, and I gasp at the sight of myself, my painted face, the dress squeezing me in at the waist. It isn't me. It can't be. The dress, though beautiful, it's not something I would have chosen. My hair and makeup are done in a way that I wouldn't have picked. My eyes well up, and my mother rushes to catch my tears on a handkerchief before they roll down my cheeks. Now, we'll have none of that, she says, her voice soft. That wasn't a soft voice I read it in. Here, one of the women presses a small glass vial into my hand. Drink. I hold it up to the light. The liquid inside is yellow. What is this? A little something from Helen's Wonderments, says the dresser. I was going to give it to my niece, but... Her eyes glaze over and she shakes her head. Well, never mind that. Drink up. A potion? I ask. I see my mother bite the inside of her lip. For luck, says the woman. You look lovely. You'll be the prettiest girl at the ball, and I'm sure you won't need it, but just in case. I turn to my mother. I want to tell her again how much I don't want to go, but before I have a chance to speak, the front door creaks open behind me, and my father steps in. The women fall silent. I tuck the vial between my skin and the corset as my mother takes his coat and hat while he stands, watching me. He doesn't look at my dress. He stares directly into my eyes. Would you all excuse us for a moment? The helper scatters, but my mother hovers nearby. What do you think? He asks. I don't answer. What do I think doesn't matter. Smoothing out his vest and rumpled sleeves, he comes to a stand in front of me. He is tall. His frame next to mine makes me feel small, but not in the way I feel when I stand by men in the market or in town. He wants to protect me, but he, like my mother, has no real idea of how to do that. He reaches into his breast pocket and produces a small package secured with brown twine. His eyes, deep and brown, mist over as the firelight casts shadows across his warm umber skin. He presses the package into my hands. You must be feeling quite conflicted, he says. That's one word for it. Angry, resentful, those are probably much better words. Probably. You are rebellious, always have been. Where you get your fiery spirit, I'll never know. He gives me a knowing little wink and motions towards the package. Are you going to open it? I pull the wrapping apart, and the beaded necklace with a sapphire cut into the shape of a heart fills into my hand. Just a trinket. It pales in comparison to you. He takes the necklace and clasps it around my neck. It was your grandmother's. She asked me to give it to you when the day came for you to go off to the ball. Is that really what she said? I ask. He narrows his eyes at me. My grandmother was like a storm, wild and unpredictable, and sometimes a little too harsh for my father's comfort. When she would speak about the ball, she never made it seem like it was something that was inevitable. She always used the word if when she spoke of it. If the day came for Sophia to go to the ball, if we were still doing this when young Sophia got older, it was her spitfire spirit, her hatred of the way Lily was run that got her killed. She had said too much to the wrong person, and the palace guards came to get her on a cold, rainy afternoon. She kicked one of them on the way out of the door. A week later, my father received a letter that informed him where he could pick up her body for burial. My father sighs and casts his gaze to the floor. She said if, not when. I miss her every single day, but I hate that she planted such nonsense in your head. I press my lips together. I don't dare tell him that once, while I sat in her lap, she told me that if I ever went to the ball, I should set the palace on fire and dance on the ashes. It was a fun but dangerous little secret between the two of us. A knot grows in my throat. I hope you understand why you must stifle to the urge to resist this, my father continues. I know you want to. I can see it in your eyes. It feels wrong to ask you to deny who you are, but it's necessary. I step forward and look right up into his face. I don't want to go. I refuse to let the tears fall. You love me, don't you? Of course, more than anything. He lowers his eyes, his hands resting gently on my shoulders. Then stand with me, behind me, beside me, something, please. I hate how out of control I feel. Sophia, please. He is pleading, desperate. I'm trying to save you. I know it's not right. You think I want you to be unhappy? Then just stop. Don't make me go. Don't let this happen. I beg him to spare me from this, but it's like he doesn't hear me. He throws his hands up. I'm not the one in charge, Sophia. He slumps down into a chair. My mother puts her hands on his shoulders. It's not fair, but I'd rather see you unhappy than be imprisoned or killed. For being who I am, I ask. For not wanting a husband, how is that wrong? My mother keeps glancing at the front door like palace guards might knock it down and drag me away from it at any moment. Keep your voice down, she says in a whisper. I can't change how you feel, says my father, but you cannot disobey the king. Your feelings, my feelings, none of that matters to him. His voice gets lower and lower as he speaks to me, his eyes downcast. He is not the only one who thinks solely of himself. The words slip out like a curse, and my father winces as if I've cut him. That's not what I want. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt you. I'm sorry, I can't be who you want me to be. A knock at the door startles us both. When my father composes himself enough to answer it, a man in a finely tailored navy blue suit stands in the doorway. Good evening, sir, the man bows low. The carriage is ready. It's time, my mother says. She tries to take me by the elbow, but I pull free from her grasp and reluctantly walk out of the house and down the footpath. The carriage, decorated with lavender curtains and matching ribbons, sit there like a beautiful vision ready to ferry me into a nightmare. 2 snow-white Clydesdales are hitched to the front, each wearing a lavender sash to match the carriage. Through the glass window, I see Aaron seeing inside. We split the cost of the carriage with Aaron's parents, my mother said. It will give you a chance to say your goodbyes. Make peace with the situation. She slips the invitation to the ball into my hand. As the reality sets in, an unfathomable sadness wells up inside me. There will be no more stolen moments, no more rendezvous at the park, no more secrets shared between us. I climb into the carriage. You look stunning, Sophia, Aaron says. I watch her gaze move over me before she looks away. Thank you, I say. I lean toward her and reach out to touch her hand when my father's face appears in the window. I sit back immediately. Try to enjoy yourself, Sophia, he says through the glass. He can't be serious. I begin to speak, but Aaron beats me to it. We'll try, sir, she says. She gives me a pointed look, and I reluctantly nod back. My father and mother watch me from the door as the carriage pulls out of the drive and begins the short journey to the castle. I can't wait to see what the palace looks like on the inside, says Erin, staring out of the carriage window. Her voice is low, her words measured. I hear they have tables and tables of food and wine, and peacocks just walk around the grounds. Can you imagine it? Real-life peacocks? Erin wears a maroon wig that has been elaborately styled and placed on her head in such a way that strands of our dark hair are still visible around the edges. I reach forward and tuck them away, letting my fingers linger near her cheek. She is all I want. Suddenly, she takes my hand in hers and presses my palm to her lips. She pulls my hand into her lap and leans forward, pressing her forehead against mine. We're out of time, she says, her eyes closed. We're not, I say, gripping her hands, breathing her in. We can stop right now. We can run. Where can we go? If I thought we could make this work, my heart leaps, a glimmer of hope springs to life. We can. You just have to say it's what you want. That's all. It's easy. She smiles, and as I go to put my arms around her, she presses my hands down into her lap, holding them there. It's not, and I know you don't want to hear this, but this isn't what I want. That spark of hope is immediately extinguished, replaced by a numbing ache. Please don't say that. You don't mean it. Erin was my first friend. The first person I cared about as more than a friend. The first and only person I've ever kissed. In the beginning, I've been so afraid to tell her how I felt about her that I lied and said another girl had feelings for her, just to see how she would react. Apparently, my ability to lie convincingly wasn't as good as I thought it was, because she saw straight through me. She told me that she cared about me too, but that we had to keep it a secret. I didn't want to keep it a secret, but I did, for her. And the moments we shared sustained me, gave me something to look forward to. Over time, as the ball grew closer, something began to change. She didn't want to hold my hand or even hear me talk about us being together. It wounded me in a way that I didn't even know was possible. She sits back, her face a mask of pain and hurt. My parents have made it clear that if I put 1 foot out of line, they'll take me to the palace's forfeit. There's no place the king couldn't find me if I tried to escape. Lily is his capital, but he holds just as much sway in every other city in Versailles. You've seen the convoys when they come through town, bearing gifts, emissaries groveling at his feet. Every king who has ruled over Lily since Cinderella's time follows the same path. You think it's any different outside our borders? It's not. That's not true, I say, scrambling to find a way to make her change her mind. The ball may lead to something wonderful for us. It sounds as if she's reading the words from a piece of paper, stiff and unfeeling. How could you say that to me? I ask in disbelief. How could you pretend like this isn't tearing you apart? I refuse to believe that everything we shared suddenly means nothing to her. You're tearing me apart, she snaps. Why do you have to question everything? Why do you have to make this so hard? Anger invades her voice, but it isn't loud enough to drown out the sadness. The same sadness that colors everything we do because we know these stolen moments are rushing us towards a catastrophic end. She crosses her arms hard over her chest. I don't want to fight for us, Sophia. I don't want to fight for something that will only bring us pain. This is wrong. Everyone says so, and they're right. It's not wrong, I say. I choose you, Aaron. I want you, and I'm willing to risk everything. Excuse me? Everything for that. Tears slide down her face, and she pats them dry with a handkerchief before they have a chance to leave streaks on her cheeks. I can't do this. I can't be an outcast. Our families are depending on us to make them proud, to find suitors who will provide for us. Disobeying the king for an impossible situation won't do that. I don't care what the king wants, I say. Because you're selfish, Aaron says bluntly. Because you've never once stopped to think that maybe I don't want to be different. I don't want to stick out. Accept it. I choke back tears. Then I give in and let them fall. Maybe laying them flow freely will give me a temporary relief from the crush of sadness that comes with knowing that Erin isn't saying she doesn't care about me. She is saying she's choosing not to. But relief never comes. The ache creeps into every part of me and lingers there, burning and painful. I can only look at her as she avoids my eyes and stares out the window. I find a little vial the dresser had given me and open the top. Erin glances at me. What is that? A potion, for luck. Erin's eyes grow wide. Really? Where'd you get that? One of the dressers gave it to me. It's from Helen's Wonderments. I drink half and offer Erin the remaining part. She hesitates for a moment, but then takes a vial from me and gulps it down. I hope against hope that it works, but something tells me we'll need much more than luck to get through this night. The carriage bounces along over the ridge. Erin shifts in her seat and a gasp escapes her lips. The palace comes into view outside the window, and it looks like something out of a painting. On any given day, the palace is extravagant, a beacon of wealth, power, and privilege. The sprawling ivory facade can be seen from miles away, but when that ball is held, it looks like something out of a dream. I wonder how he manages to do that, to make something so terrible seem so inviting. This isn't a dream, it's a nightmare, made real, and there's no waking up. Give me a second. I'm checking to see if I really want to read the rest of this right now. Yeah, I'm not reading the rest of this right now. I'll come back soon, though. I'll finish reading it, though. Okay. And part 2 coming soon.